And welcome to part one of what I read in June. No, May. Dang. This is me giving you guys a teaser for what's coming up next. Cryptic, because I don't want to give stuff away. So so she is almost married. Wow, they really give away way too much in this blurb. I'm not gonna say this. Hi everybody, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse, and welcome to part one of what I read in May. So we are still in May, towards the very, very end of it. I don't know if I'm going to finish another book, but either way, I'm still gonna split it up into two parts because there's a lot that I wanna talk about, of course, but I've got some new to me authors. I did several rereads because I've just been in the mood for rereads, plus some of the rereads have purposes to them, which I will talk about. But let's get into what I read, because you know that this is gonna run long because I always run long, so let's not waste any time. Let's get right in. The first book I have is The New Girl by Jessie Q. Sutanto, and I wound up doing the audiobook of this, and this was one of my most anticipated books. It is like boarding school vibes, YA, mystery, murder, thriller, and I was super excited for it, and I would say it wound up just being okay. There were parts of it that I really loved. There were parts of our main character, Leah, that I was completely like laughing out loud about. And then there were other parts of it where I felt really conscious of how un-YA I actually am. And like, maybe like a little out of touch with what's going on with some things. So this was narrated by Eunice Wong and the audiobook was really good. And I definitely feel like the audio narration lent to a lot of what I was laughing out loud about, especially with our main character, but sort of her like self-deprecating snark that was going on to it. And some of it's just like the chatter in her own head that I was very much enjoying. And I was intrigued by the mystery, and it's very hard to talk about without talking spoilers. So I'm not gonna talk spoilers at all, but I was kind of like moving along. But then I had like this real optimistic hope of, I was like, oh, like we're gonna do the thing. But then I just sort of felt like, oh no, we're not gonna do the thing. So this is a case of, it's not the book, it's me. And it's that thing where like, you want a book to go in a certain direction and it doesn't go in the direction you wanted. And I wanted it to go where I wanted it to go. It's like when you don't get the ending you wanted and you were just like, well, okay, that didn't work for me. So anyway, this is about a girl named Leah. So she winds up getting a full ride to the prestigious Draycott Academy on a track scholarship. And she's determined to make it work even though she's never felt more out of place. So she is definitely, I mean, obviously like scholarship kid at the super rich school. She winds up coming into it, I wanna say it's partway through her sophomore year or junior year she joined. So she's not like original with this group. So she's like really, really odd girl out. And she's definitely feeling like the wrath of the cool girls at the school, and definitely feeling very, very odd girl out the entire time. I don't know how else to describe it without saying the same thing. So in her first day on campus, she shows up and she winds up seeing this girl being forcefully carried away by campus security. Her new schoolmates and teachers seem unfazed, but it leaves her unsure of what she's gotten herself into. So this girl is like literally screaming and getting dragged out of a building. And Leah's like, what's going on there? And people are like, she's nuts. She has a drug problem. Don't worry about it. So the girl who was getting yanked out was expelled. And Leah, of course, is like, basically like taking her place on the track team and literally living in her room, and starts to become super involved in who that girl was and what happened. And then you've got sort of the love interest, you've got the super rich friends, you've got the super mean girls, and then there's this Gossip Girl style online website called Draycott Dirt, where people can anonymously post things about each other. So there's like low-key, high-key racism going on in this. There's bullying, there's drug use, like none of these things, I don't want to say like none of these things bother me, but like none of these were not the things that didn't work for me. What didn't work for me in this book, I think, is partially I have read so many thrillers and mysteries that I could see what was coming with a lot of things. And then also, well, I don't necessarily struggle with like our characters making choices I wouldn't make, but like that's the choice they make for themselves. I really felt like she made some really bad choices that normally you wouldn't make if you were stuck in some of these situations. And again, I can't really talk about it without giving stuff away, but there were moments of it that I really enjoyed, and there were parts of it that I like very much liked, and there were some characters I did like, and I didn't even mind that like she wasn't the ultimate hero. Like, I don't need Leah to be the hero, but I definitely felt like for someone who is supposed to be uber smart, she wasn't always uber smart in the decisions that she made. So it was fine. Like, it was just like a fine book. It was okay. I'm really still very interested in Dial A for Aunties. And I know she wrote another book. I want to say it's called Obsession or The Obsession, which I believe also takes place at Draycott, but they're not related to each other. I think it's just sort of like set in that same universe at different times. But I will definitely be reading more by Jessie Q. Sutanto because I did enjoy some of the writing of it all, but ultimately this one just didn't wholly work for me. The second book I read this month is called Good as Gone by Amy Gentry. So I had pulled this for my booklist backlist TBR that I did in April. Did the ladies do that? But like hot pink on the cover was one of the prompts. And when I made that giant TBR, I knew I wasn't going to read all of it, but as of course I was pulling the books, I was like, dang, I really want to read some of these. So I wound up reading it in May instead. But this is one of those books where I thought I knew what I was getting, and it wound up being sort of a totally different story in some ways, which didn't make it better or worse, just more of my expectations were of like, oh, this is what this story is going to be. But it was like, oh no, this is what this story is going to be. So the basic premise, core premise of this story is about a girl named Julie. So when the book opens, she's 13 years old and she gets kidnapped out of her family's house. So her younger sister actually witnesses it, but does nothing. And Julie tells her sister, like, keep your mouth shut, do nothing. And her parents are asleep downstairs and she winds up getting kidnapped out of her house. And she was never found. They never figured out who took her, what happened, no trace of her, nothing. And then we fast forward 8 years, like within like a chapter, we fast forward 8 years, and Julie shows up on her parents' doorstep, home, back, after being gone all of this time, with an explanation of what happened. So we wind up following this story of a family who has been so broken for all of these years and dealing with so much grief and guilt and anger and frustration. And now their child is back and there are questions and confusion, and the younger sister who has been living all of her life with the guilt of not having said anything that night. And it all starts to bubble up to the surface. And then at the same time, we get this private detective who used to be a police officer who reaches out to Anna, who is the mother, with his own theories on Julie and the case and the police botching it in the past and evidence that maybe wasn't necessarily shared and maybe leads that weren't necessarily followed. And he is questioning who this girl is who has shown up on their doorstep. So you get a lot of questions, a lot of sort of, again, frustrations, resentments. We get multiple points of view. And this is sort of where expectations were, it's not even that they weren't met, and it's not even that they were subverted. It was just sort of like I expected it to just be kidnap, return story, but there are all these other points of view that just take us in so many different directions, which create the story. So I can't say anything about it without ruining something, so I just advise that you go in a bit blind and maybe just not be quite sure what the book is about. But it is definitely some dark subject matter at times. It is unnerving, it can be uncomfortable. It is one of those books that is, you know, the lengths parents will go to for their children, and what a family will do when they are so shattered apart by something so devastating happening to their family, and how it changes the relationship with the people who are still at home, the parents and the younger daughter, and how the town is reacting to things. And it's just, it was very interesting in ways that I wasn't expecting, because the story went into so many different directions that I wasn't expecting. So ultimately I enjoyed it. There's definitely some darkness to this book, and I will definitely read more by Amy Gentry. So I'm very glad that I read it. It just was so much more than sort of kidnapped child returned kind of a story, but it's definitely not gonna be a for everyone story because of some of the darker subject matter that's in this one. So I'm glad I read it, and I'm I don't even want to say like I'm glad I'm wrong about what it was about, but I'm glad that it took me on a journey and surprised me because it wasn't just what I thought it was going to be. The next book I have is one of my 5-star predictions, and this is Mr. Tender's Girl by Carter Wilson. So I'm not gonna tell you if it's 5 stars. You're gonna have to wait until I read all 3 of them and you get a wrap up of that video. But this was the first one I had, and this is loosely based on the Slender Man case, which I knew only a little bit about. And what I found really interesting in the afterword of this book is Carter Wilson said he had heard about that case, which took place in Wisconsin, and it was, I want to say, 2 teenage girls took a friend of theirs into the woods and they stabbed her repeatedly, saying that they were driven to do so by the Slender Man, which was like this fictional character. Like, this is like a true crime, like this actually happened. And he heard that like nugget of it and was like, this makes for a great story. And he wound up not reading anything else about the case because he didn't want it to influence his book. So this book is not based on the entire Slender Man case. It's just based on that initial idea of really happened with these 2 girls who tried to stab their friend, who wound up surviving. So in this book, this is about a girl named Alice Hill. And when she was 14 years old, she was living outside of London with her family, and 2 of her best friends from school brought her into the park and tried to kill her, saying that Mr. Tender basically told them to sacrifice her and they would be rewarded for it. But Alice's father is the creator of Mr. Tender, who is a character in graphic novels that he was writing. So Alice survives, obviously, just like in the real case, and her entire family kind of falls apart, understandably. And Alice and her younger brother and her mother wind up moving to the US, hopefully to escape all that goes along with this. So when the book opens, we meet Alice 10 years later as an adult. She is living in New Hampshire. She owns a coffee shop. She is trying to move on with her life. She has changed her last name. No one that she works with knows anything about her. Nobody knows her story. She's a bit estranged from her mother and her younger brother, who has his own problems, and her mom has her own problems, and her father has passed away. But Alice starts to get some pictures in the mail and some communications, and somebody knows who she is, and somebody is out to get her, and she's trying to figure out who it is. So this book, I have not read a Carter Wilson before, so I don't know if this is typical for him, but I'm gonna guess it is. Was so dark and messed up, which, wheelhouse, it's my wheelhouse, so I'm not mad about it. I don't know if you can tell, like, I dog-eared a lot of this book. Like, I really went to town on this book. This book definitely made me uncomfortable, and like, don't let the tabs fool you. Like, there's a lot of dog-earing going on here, and the tabs were probably just like a specific line that I really lived for, but it is very dark and messed up. And man, do we go on a journey with Alice as she tries to figure out who is after her and what is going on, and her determination to just make it stop. So we really go on a ride with her, and it says she can't escape her past, but Mr. Tender is never far behind. He will come with a smile that seduces and a dark whisper in her ear. Like, again, her father passed away. After she was stabbed, he stopped writing the graphic novels. Like, he fully blamed himself for what happened to her. But all these years later, more graphic novels with Mr. Tender start coming out, and again, being sent to her, but no one is supposed to know who she is. So who's behind it? What's going on? It was definitely super creepy, and I have not yet, but I'm going to dive deeper into the Slender Man case. I definitely listened to part of it on like a true crime podcast, like, I don't know, a couple years ago, but Lindsay from Lindsay's Little Library told me there's definitely, I want to say, a 2020 special on it, and it happened, I feel like, not too far from where Lindsay's from, or she was like familiar enough with it, not in the sense of like familiar with it, but it's like in her area. So anyway, Slender Man case, inspiration for this one. The next one is one of my first rereads of the month, and this time it's In My Dreams I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. So I wound up listening to the audiobook of it this time, and I just want to get it right. So Vanessa Johansson is the audio narrator for this book, and it was so good. So I read this book originally last year, putting down my iPad, and if you guys were around in my April wrap up, I read Fool Me Once, which was Ashley Winstead's romance debut that came out, which I loved so freaking much. So good. But this was her thriller debut that came out last year, and her next thriller, The Last Housewife, comes out in August. So part of my, I feel like I talked about this in my like what to do while you're waiting for new releases to come out. I just, after Fool Me Once, I needed more Ashley Winstead because she's only written 2 books so far. She said 2 books come out in less than a year. I wanted more of her, so I went back and read this again. And I gave this 5 stars the first time I read it, and I like don't think it's possible to give it more than 5 stars, but I would give it more than 5 stars because I absolutely loved it. So this is everything I want in a book. This is college reunion, past and present timelines, friends with dark and messed up secrets, and everything bubbling over at the reunion. So back in the day, they were the East House 7 at Duquesne University, and it was this group of friends who became fast friends beginning of freshman year. And then senior year, Heather is found murdered in her room. And another friend in the group was accused of it. There was never enough evidence. No one was ever convicted. No one ever found out what happened that night. But 10 years later, they're at their college reunion, and someone is committed to figuring out what happened to Heather and what happened in this group of friends. So we get the past of all of them in college. We get the present day, and it is just such a delicious book. And it is almost completely narrated by Jessica Miller. So we do get a couple little snippets from other people, but she always felt less than in this group. And like, she was always just second best and never quite good enough. And she is committed to coming back to this 10-year reunion and showing everyone how successful she is and how amazing she is. And I just love the dynamic between this group of friends. I love, it's just like secrets and lies and trying to unravel what happened back then, and things are just getting slowly revealed. And I just think it was so brilliantly done, and I absolutely loved this book. And people do dark and messed up things in this, which is also why I love it, but I can't scream enough about how great this book is, and I legit can't wait. That came out so funny, but I legit can't wait for The Last Housewife to come out. I've heard nothing but amazing things about that book as well, and I just think Ashley Winstead is just a force to be reckoned with. So if you love thrillers, in my dreams, if you are more of a romance with like a bit of, I would say like humor, some sexy time. I feel like kind of like in the vein of like Christina Lauren or like a red, white, and royal blue kind of a vibe to it. Fool Me Once is amazing as well. That book is also going to have a sequel, which I'm super excited about, which I think comes out like spring of next year. But she just like, keep them coming, Ashley. I don't know how she writes as quickly as she does, but like keep it coming because I am 1000% here for everything she writes. And then the last book I'm going to talk about in this part of my wrap up is A Flicker in the Dark by Stacey Willingham. I also loved this book so much. My gosh. This was one of my most anticipated books, and I am so glad I read it. I can't believe it took me as long as it did to read it, but I was hooked. And I had so many theories of who or what or how it was going to get resolved. Like, this is one of those books where I felt like I was in Chloe's shoes with her, trying to investigate what happened and trying to figure out what happened. Like, I was her. I had my Chloe hat on and I was following the clues with her and I was trying to decipher what was what, and I just absolutely loved it. And I will say Stacey Willingham completely got me. Like, I had one theory where I was like, yes, it's this, it's totally this. And like, no, girl, no, it was not that. It was not that at all, which I love. Like, as much as I love being right, I also love totally being wrong. But yeah, she totally got me with this book. So in this one, we follow a woman named Chloe Davis. And when she was 12, 6 teenage girls went missing in her small Louisiana town. And by the end of that summer, her father confessed to murdering them. So no bodies were ever found, but evidence was found to connect him to those murders, and he confessed and has been in prison ever since. So when we meet Chloe in the present day, it's 20 years after everything happened with her father, and she's created a really good life for herself. So she lives in Baton Rouge now. She has her own practice. She's a psychologist. She is getting married really soon, and things seem to be going really well for her. But then a young girl, teenage girl in her town disappears. And things start to feel really reminiscent to what happened that summer when her father was accused of killing those girls. And it becomes a case of, is she paranoid? Is she seeing things where there aren't things? Or is history repeating itself? And did the cops get it wrong all those years ago? Is there a copycat out there? Like, what's going on? And she understandably becomes obsessed with figuring out what's happening. And like I said, I had my Chloe hat on and I was in it with her. And I just thought it was so well done. It's atmospheric. The writing is really good. The characters are really good. Like, I was hooked. I was pulled in by them. Like I said, I was like so suspect of some things. I tabbed it up quite a bit. I just was totally invested in this book. I read it pretty quickly and I feel like she really grasped. I have never been to Louisiana before, but I feel like I could feel like I was in Louisiana with her, whether it was the signs, the sights, the smells, the swamp, the humidity, just like all of it. Like, I feel like you felt transported into this time and into Louisiana, and I just thought it was so well done. So, such a fan. It's definitely a thriller, but there's like some slow burn to it. And I thought there were some really clever, creative things that she did. And I can't say what they are because they're giveaways for certain things. But I really thought she did a tremendous job with this. And again, debut author, props to like the nth degree, because I thought it was just so great. I thought the story was smart. I thought the twists were smart. I thought the red herrings were really good. Like I said, she like totally got me with something and I was hooked. I was totally hooked by this book. So if you have not already, definitely give this one a go. She's a new book coming out in January and I feel like I sat here 6 months ago and was like, I can't even believe I have to wait till the summer for such and such to have a book come out. Riley Sager. So I'm gonna sit here now and be like, I can't believe I'm gonna have to wait 6 months for another Stacey Willingham, but I know I'm gonna blink and it's gonna be here, so I can't wait. But in the meantime, if you have not already, read A Flicker in the Dark because it is tremendous. So like I said, that's gonna do it for the first part of what I read in May. So coming up, I've got another audiobook. I've got 2 audiobooks off the top of my head. I've got some more rereads. I've got a new to me author. We'll see if I can knock out one more book before the month is out. We'll see how, you know, what happens there. But until then, let me know, how is your reading month? What did you read? Favorite book of the month? Anything about anything you read this month? Anything about these books that I read this month? Anything about anything is good too. The endings of these videos are always super awkward. So I'm gonna go, but thank you guys so much for spending part of your day with me and hanging out here. And I will see you guys in another video really soon. Take care, guys. Bye.